up, everyone always has a role model, someone that they can look up to, whether it be a good influence or a bad influence. It's someone that changes a moment of their life for them. For me, it was always my grandma, my mom's dad. She lives in Indiana, and I only see her once or twice every once in a while every year. She has 5 kids, and my dad was actually the youngest of all of them. She went out of her way to help everyone, and whenever her and my dad were in a room together, you could always tell that she was so proud of him, and I never understood why. It wasn't until about 16 that I figured out how messed up my family was, and why my grandma actually liked my dad so much and was so proud of him, because he was the only one that got out of Indiana and actually made something of himself. Whenever I was 16, I got told that one of my uncles was actually in jail for being a drug dealer. He was a complete addict. He got caught numerous times for doing drugs, and then finally got caught for dealing drugs and spent 5 years in jail. He had 2 kids, my cousins Brittany and my other cousin Patrick. And Brittany ended up just going and getting married because she was pregnant whenever her dad went into jail. She went into jail herself for the same thing that her dad did. But she was a minor at the time, so she didn't get as long as my uncle did. My cousin Patrick actually went and lived with my grandma. At this point in time, my grandpa was still around. My grandma was okay with it. She always opened her doors to anyone that she possibly could. But that wasn't all that my grandma had to deal with. A couple of years later, whenever she still had Patrick in the house, my other uncle was married to this lady that was also a drug addict. One night, my grandma got a phone call whenever I was up there, and it was just me, her, and Patrick was in the house, but he wasn't home. Got a phone call from my cousin Cody, and I didn't think much of it, and it wasn't until about a year or 2 later that I figured out why my grandma actually got that phone call. It turns out that Cody's mom actually OD'd on painkillers and died that night. I didn't know why we got the phone call. All that I know is that we went and picked up Cody and brought him back to my grandma's house for the night. My uncle could care less about Cody. He was in and out of my grandma's house almost every other weekend because his dad could care less. It wasn't until about 7 or 8 years later that my uncle finally cleaned up his act and actually became a parent that someone would like to have. Cody always loved being with my grandma and tried to help her in every single way that he possibly could. But Patrick, being from a family full of drug addicts and people who had no discipline at all, basically walked all over my grandma in every single way that he possibly could. My grandma opened up her house to everyone in her whole entire family, every single chance she got, and she got walked all over by numerous people because they knew that she would always be there to help them out. My grandma has always been my role model, not because of the fact that she's a part of my family, but for the fact that she's a part of my family who has been through so much. Whenever my cousin's mom actually died, it was around the same time that my grandpa died. My grandma was going through so much with the man of her life dying and never had time to herself to actually deal with the fact or grief for the fact that her husband had died. Instead, she opened up her house to every single person in her whole entire family and was there for all of them, that she barely ever had time for herself. This has always been my role model, and if I grow up to be half the woman that she is, I know that my life was worth it. Thank you.